Just seconds after texting me a sweet, teasing emoji to beg for attention, Chelsea posted a TikTok. In the video, she was sitting on the back of a tricked-out electric scooter, her arms wrapped tightly around some bleach-blonde punk's waist, laughing with a wild, unfiltered abandonment I'd never seen from her before. "Is this ride custom, babe? What's the 0 to 60? She asked, her voice breathless over the wind. "A little over 3 seconds. Wild, right?" The punk replied, looking back with a cocky grin. I stared at the screen, a dry, hollow laugh escaping my throat. I had spent millions on her over the past 3 years, trying to win her heart. And yet, on our 3rd anniversary, she was out street racing with a kid she'd probably met yesterday. Without a second thought, I picked up the office phone, dialed my assistant, and instructed her to cancel the deed transfer for the townhouse in the hills. "I run a multi-billion-dollar company," I murmured to myself, leaning back in my chair. "Women in this city would kill to be in her position. Why am I begging for scraps?" "I'll handle it right away," my assistant said. Once she closed the door, I leaned back in my leather chair and closed my eyes, letting the quiet of the office wash over me. 3 years ago, Chelsea was a senior in college, interning at my friend David's tech firm. I was there to discuss a merger that afternoon. Walking past the glass conference room, I saw her kneeling on the carpet, frantically picking up loose papers. They were scattered everywhere. Her face was flushed a deep, panicked red, her ears burning. When someone walked past, she scrambled to get out of the way, only to knock the neat stack right back onto the floor. I stood there for a moment, then walked in and knelt down, silently gathering a few pages for her. She looked up, her eyes wide, and whispered a soft, fragile, "Thank you." Her voice was quiet, but it had a rare, untainted quality to it. There was a raw innocence in her eyes that made something quiet in my chest stir. Later, I asked David about her. "Just a new intern," he told me. "Middle-class family, great GPA, quiet girl." "She's beautiful," I had said. "Get me her contact details." David laughed. "Nick, is the eternal bachelor finally looking to settle down?" I didn't answer. But out of a sudden, protective instinct, and perhaps a bit of weariness of people wanting me only for my money, I decided to hide who I was. Our first real date was at a cramped, noisy little Thai joint downtown. She ordered the cheapest pad Thai on the menu. When I added a plate of crispy pork belly, she kept waving her hands, insisting it was too much, that we'd never finish it. When the bill came, she sneaked a quick glance at the total, then quietly asked the waiter for a box to pack up the leftovers. In a world of social climbers, she felt like a breath of fresh air. I was incredibly careful during our courtship. I drove my driver's old, dented Audi A4. I wore plain, unbranded cashmere sweaters with the labels carefully snipped off. The first gift I gave her was a scarf, no flashy brand name, but woven from the finest cashmere, costing thousands. She turned it over in her hands, asking if it was expensive. $10 at a street market. I lied. She believed me and wore it every single day that winter. Our dates were simple. Cheap diners, indie movies, long walks through the park. She always said she liked the simple things in life. I thought it was her genuine soul. But over our 3 years together, even after she accepted my proposal to be her boyfriend, there was always a distance. She never texted first, never asked about my day, never held my hand unless I reached for hers. If I went out of town for business, my phone would remain silent for days. I made excuses for her. She's just independent, I told myself. She doesn't need to be clingy. But in that TikTok, she was holding that blonde kid like her life depended on it. Her face flushed with a thrill she'd never shown me, calling him babe. I opened my eyes, picked up my phone, and rewatched it. The punk wore a backward baseball cap. When he revved the modified electric motor, the bike jolted forward, throwing her back. She squealed, laughing, and locked her arms tighter around his waist. I tapped on his profile. Just a dozen videos, all of them street racing, popping wheelies, and doing illegal stunts on modified bikes. The latest one, posted this afternoon, was captioned, "Taking the new girl out. She says this beats riding in the 4 rings any day." They had known each other for less than 72 hours. Someone commented, "That toy cost $3,000 max. That's loose change compared to a real Audi." The kid replied, "Does an Audi turn heads like this? Didn't think so." I flipped the phone screen down on my desk. 3 years ago, I quietly had David raise her intern stipend from $500 to $2,500 a month, paying the difference out of my own pocket. When she got hired full-time, I had it bumped to $8,000. She had no idea. She just thought she was exceptionally good at her job, and that the firm was incredibly generous. 2 years ago, when she complained about her long commute, I pulled strings to find her a gorgeous, fully furnished 2-bedroom apartment near her office. I paid the landlord $5,000 a month, but had my real estate agent tell her the owner was a sweet old lady renting it out for $400 just to keep the place clean. For her birthday last year, I gave her a pair of delicate bracelets. She assumed they were cheap silver and wore them carelessly, almost dropping them down the bathroom drain once. I never told her they were custom platinum, designed by a master jeweler in Paris, worth $80,000. To her, I was Nick, a mid-level manager making a comfortable 80 grand a year, driving a sensible used sedan. Middle class. Boring. She didn't know the parent company belonged to me. She didn't know the scale of my portfolio. She didn't know that my boring meetings were with senators and international board members. She didn't even know her boss answered to me. I had planned to tell her everything tonight. The papers for a beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn were sitting in my bag, fully paid for, just waiting for her signature. I had a flawless, 3-carat diamond ring tucked away, and a letter, handwritten. In it, I explained why I'd kept my identity secret, my deepest feelings for her, and the life I wanted to build with her. I had practiced the words in the mirror. Chelsea, I'm sorry I kept this from you for so long. But starting today, no more secrets. I want to give you the world. The letter was still resting in my top drawer. I pulled it out, read it over once, and tore it down the middle. I threw the scraps into the wastebasket just as my phone buzzed on the desk. Nick, did you make the reservation? Her voice was the same as always, light, soft, slightly detached. Yeah, I said, my voice perfectly level. The usual place. Great. I'll head over right after work. I arrived at our little Thai joint early. I ordered a pot of green tea and sipped it slowly, watching the city lights flicker to life outside. It was completely dark by the time Chelsea finally pushed open the door. God, work was brutal today, she sighed, sliding into the booth opposite me. David was breathing down our necks for the new proposal. The whole team had to stay late. David was my friend. 10 minutes before she arrived, I had called him. He confirmed Chelsea had taken the entire day off. I didn't call her out. Sounds rough, I said. It's fine, she said, offering a weak smile. Not the first time. When the food arrived, she picked up her chopsticks and grabbed a piece of the crispy pork belly. Still the best in town. I never get sick of this place. I didn't reply, just chewing slowly on a piece of bok choy. Halfway through the meal, her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, a sudden flash of nervousness crossing her face. Oh, it's David. I should probably take this outside. She slid out of the booth, clutch purse in hand. Is it David? I said quietly. Or the kid with the custom e-bike? She froze. What? I asked if the call is from the blonde kid on the modified bike. She stared at me, her face pale, a forced laugh slipping from her lips. What are you talking about? What blonde kid? Nick, you're making no sense. I unlocked my phone, pulled up the TikTok video, and slid the screen across the worn wooden table. She looked down. On the glowing screen, she was clinging to the blonde kid's waist, laughing with a radiant, carefree joy. A waiter walked past us, murmuring an apology as he squeezed through. Chelsea took a step back to let him pass, and then she let out a breathy, genuine laugh. It wasn't the polite, guarded smile she usually gave me. It was real, cold, sharp, and laced with the relief of someone who was finally tired of pretending. She sat back down, sliding my phone back to my side of the table. Fine. Since you saw it, I won't lie. I didn't work today. I went riding down by the harbor with him, and we posted a video. So what? Is that a crime? Her voice was low, but the words spilled out fast, defensive. Nick, I've been with you for 3 years. Do you have any idea what these 3 years have been like for me? You wear the same boring clothes, flannel shirts, dark jackets, looking like you're pushing 50. I asked you to change it up, and you just said you like being comfortable. You drive that beaten-up Audi that can barely accelerate past a stoplight. You make decent money, but you live like you're on minimum wage. We can't eat out without you looking at the prices first. You park blocks away to avoid paying for parking, and we only go to the movies on discount Tuesdays. Do you know what my friends say about you? They say you're boring. They say you have no taste, that you're holding me back. I always defended you. I told them you were sweet, that you were stable. But I'm tired of defending you, Nick. She paused, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. That kid? He doesn't have your stable job, and he definitely doesn't have your savings. But he actually knows how to live. He takes me out to bars, he rides with the wind in my hair, he introduces me to his friends, we make videos. I feel alive when I'm with him. But with you? I feel like I'm retired. We are living in 2 completely different worlds, Nick. I stared into her eyes. The quiet, untouched innocence from 3 years ago was entirely gone, replaced by a cheap, bitter ambition. Are you done? I asked. I am, she said, leaning back in her seat, crossing her arms. So, what are you going to do about it? I nodded slowly. Then let's break up. She blinked, caught off guard by how effortlessly the words left my mouth. Then a smirk crept back onto her face, cold and dismissive. Fine with me. Honestly, I've been waiting for this. If I didn't feel a little bad because you've been so loyal, I would have ended it last month. She swiped her phone and dialed a number. The second it picked up, her tone shifted into a sweet, high-pitched purr. Hey babe, where are you? Yeah, I'm done eating. It's over between us. Can you come pick me up? I picked up my teacup and took a sip. The tea had gone cold. It tasted incredibly bitter. About 10 minutes later, the door to the diner swung open. The blonde kid swaggered in. Black leather jacket, ripped jeans, heavy boots, and his cap askew. A cigarette was tucked behind his ear. He scanned the room, spotted Chelsea, and walked straight over. As he passed my side of the table, he paused, sizing me up with a smirk. He let out a quiet, mocking scoff, then wrapped his arm around Chelsea's shoulders. "Let's go, babe." Chelsea nodded, then began unzipping her bag and taking off her jewelry. First, she slipped the silver bracelets off her left wrist and slid them across the table. "Here. You bought these. Take them back." Then came the necklace. To her, it was just a cheap silver chain. But the pendant was a custom piece I'd had designed by an artisan, completely one of a kind. The clasp caught on her hair for a second before she ripped it free and dropped it next to the bracelets. "This too." She rummaged through her purse and pulled out a sleek black fountain pen. I had given it to her for her birthday, claiming it was a vintage find from a local antique shop. In reality, it was a bespoke Mont Blanc, engraved with her initials. Finally, she unzipped a small leather keychain from her bag. A designer leather piece I'd bought in Paris on a whim for over $2,000. "That's everything," she said. She took a deep, theatrical breath and looked down at me. "We're even now. Don't owe you a thing." I looked at the small pile on the table. The bracelets, the necklace, the pen, the keychain. 3 years of my life, summarized in a handful of items she thought were worthless trash. Without a word, I gathered them up and tossed them into the plastic trash bin next to our booth. The jewelry hit the bottom of the bin with a sharp, hollow clang. Next went the pen, and then the keychain. My movements were slow, deliberate, as if I were simply clearing away used napkins. Chelsea's eyes flickered, her expression faltering for a fraction of a second. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. It was the blonde kid who laughed. "Oh, look at him. Big man." He put the cigarette in his mouth, tilting his head with a mocking grin. "Throwing away $50 of junk to act tough? You trying to flex on me, bro?" I ignored him, lifting the teapot to pour myself another cup of lukewarm tea. My silence only fueled his ego. He took a step closer, towering over the edge of the booth, looking down at me. "I know your type," he sneered. "Driving a beat-up sedan, spending every dime of your pathetic paycheck trying to keep a girl, and then acting like a cool guy when she dumps you. You look like a loser who buys one drink at a bar and sits there all night just to pretend he's someone. You've got nothing, man." He blew a stream of smoke directly toward my face. "Chelsea wasted 3 years on you because she felt sorry for you. Now she's smartened up, so stop acting like the broken-hearted hero. Throwing stuff away? Please. The second we walk out that door, you're going to dig right back into that trash can." I lifted my gaze, meeting his eyes with a cold, flat stare. "Are you finished?" "Not even close." The kid crushed his glowing cigarette but directly into our wooden table, leaving a charred black scar on the wood. "I want to talk about that piece of shit Audi. My custom bike can lap you before you even hit the gas. You actually thought you could pull a girl like Chelsea with that. My bike has over 10 grand in modifications. 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat. What's your Audi do? 8 seconds? 9? It's embarrassing. You couldn't even get trade-in value for that junk." He looked back at Chelsea, laughing loudly. "Am I right, babe?" Chelsea didn't answer. She was staring at me, a strange, uneasy flicker in her eyes. I set my teacup down, keeping my eyes locked on him. "Watch your mouth," I said. My voice was quiet, completely devoid of anger. The kid blinked, then let out a sharp laugh. "Watch my mouth? What, you gonna sue me, old man?" He leaned down, his face inches from mine. "I'll say whatever I want. Loser. Cheapskate. Chump. Which one fits best? Or do you want them all?" A few patrons at nearby tables were staring now. The waiter hovered near the counter, debating whether to step in. Chelsea frowned, pulling lightly on the sleeve of his leather jacket. "Come on, let's just go. He's not worth it." He shook her off. "Don't worry about it. I want to see what this tough guy is actually gonna do." He turned back to me, wagging his finger in my face. "Let me tell you something, buddy. You're always going to be exactly where you are right now. Find yourself some boring, average girl and settle down. Leave Chelsea alone. You're out of your league, got it?" I looked at him, saying nothing. He took my silence as fear. With a smug grin, he spun around and threw his arm back around Chelsea. "Let's go, babe. Forget this clown. Let's go ride." Chelsea let him lead her away, but after a few steps, she stopped. She didn't turn around. Keeping her back to me, her voice was quiet but deliberate. "Nick, I hope you don't call me. I don't want to see you again." Then they pushed through the glass door and disappeared into the night. The diner held its breath for a few seconds before the low hum of conversation resumed. A few people glanced my way with pity, then returned to their meals. As I was paying the bill, my childhood friend Zach called. "Hey Nick, the guys are hosting a supercar meet tonight under the riverfront bridge. You coming?" Normally, I avoided those noisy, high-profile club meets. But tonight I needed a distraction. "Sure," I said. I'll be there. I went back to my penthouse, took a long shower, and changed into a clean black shirt. I handed the keys of the Audi back to my driver, and took my own car out of the private garage. It was a limited edition, V12 Lamborghini Aventador SVJ in matte gray. It had been delivered just last week, and the temporary plates were still fresh. By the time I reached the riverfront, the dark underpass was already lined with exotic cars. Zach was leaning against his Porsche, smoking a cigarette. He waved when he saw my headlights. Neat. Finally. We were waiting for you. Let's take them out for a spin. As our convoy neared the bridge, Zach's voice crackled over the radio, laced with annoyance. What the hell is this? I looked ahead. The space beneath the massive concrete bridge was packed with a sea of modified electric scooters and mopeds. At least 30 or 40 of them. A few teenagers were popping wheelies, showing off. Their bikes were wrapped in neon LED strips, and portable speakers blasted heavy music. A crowd of street kids stood around in circles, laughing and cheering. Zach slammed his hand on his steering wheel over the radio. You've got to be kidding me. Our flyer said supercar meet, and these kids thought it was a ride out for Super 73 e-bikes. The other drivers in our group started chiming in. Some laughed. Some just shook their heads. A guy wearing a green bezel Rolex Submariner joked over the comms. They probably saw Super Meet on social media and rushed over. Didn't bother reading the fine print. Wrong kind of super. Kids. The kids under the bridge noticed us then. A few heads turned, then more, until the loud chatter and music began to die down. Someone hastily shut off their speaker. Hundreds of eyes stared in absolute silence as a dozen roaring supercars rolled slowly toward them. We pulled up and brought the convoy to a halt. My V12 engine let out a deep, guttural rumble that echoed off the concrete walls before I shut it off. As I stepped out of the car, I saw him in the crowd. The blonde kid was standing right at the front of the pack. Same leather jacket, same stupid cap. He had a cigarette in his hand, the ash growing long and crumbling onto his shoes. He was staring at my car, paralyzed, before his eyes slowly drifted up to my face. Chelsea was standing right next to him, leaning against his custom bike, her phone held up to record a video. Her camera was pointed directly at me, but her hand had frozen. Her eyes were wide with sheer, suffocating disbelief. The thrum of the Lamborghini's V12 engine died down, leaving an oppressive, ringing silence under the concrete arches of the riverfront bridge. The air smelled of burnt rubber, high-octane fuel, and the damp mist rising from the harbor below. 100 street kids stood frozen. The neon LED strips on their modified scooters flickered uselessly against the glaring, razor-sharp xenon headlights of $12 million supercars. Chelsea's hand was shaking so violently her phone slipped from her grip. It hit the pavement with a sharp, metallic clack, the screen spiderwebbing into 100 tiny fractures. She didn't even bend down to pick it up. Her eyes remained locked on my face, her lips parted in a soundless, terrifying gasp. Nick. Her voice was barely a whisper, carried away by the river breeze. The blonde kid standing next to her, whose name, I recalled from his profile, was Brody, stared at the matte gray carbon fiber hood of my Aventador SVJ. His jaw was slack, his unlit cigarette dangling limply from the corner of his mouth. He looked at the temporary plates. He looked at the custom-forged wheels. Then, he looked at my clean black shirt, my posture, and the heavy gold and platinum Patek Philippe Nautilus glowing under the bridge lights. No way, Brody muttered, a nervous, defensive chuckle breaking from his throat. No way. This is a rental. He rented this for the night. You can rent these in Vegas for $2,000 a day. Zach walked over, lighting a fresh cigarette, resting his arm casually on the roof of my car. He let out a loud, booming laugh that echoed off the concrete pillars. A rental? Zach scoffed, looking at Brody like he was an exotic species of insect. Kid, this is an SVJ 63, one of 63 in the world. The allocation list was closed 2 years before the car was even built. You couldn't rent this if you handed the dealership the deed to your mother's house. Zach turned to me, flicking his ash toward Brody's front tire. Nick, who's your friend here? Is this the local bicycle club you were telling me about? I didn't answer Zach. I didn't look at Brody either. I took 2 steps forward, stopping 3 feet from Chelsea. Up close, without the warm lighting of the Thai diner or the soft filters of her social media videos, she looked shockingly small. The confidence she had shown an hour ago, when she bragged about feeling alive, when she told me I lived like a retiree, had vanished entirely. Nick? Chelsea took a step toward me, her voice cracking, reaching out a hand. Instinctively. Nick, what is this? Why are you driving this car? Who are these people? I looked down at her hand, then looked back up into her eyes. My expression was flat. No anger. No hate. Just the cold, clinical distance of a man observing a complete stranger. I told you at the restaurant, Chelsea, I said, my voice smooth and level. We live in 2 completely different worlds. Brody tried to step between us, his chest puffed out, though his eyes were darting nervously toward Zach and the 4 other wealthy drivers stepping out of their Ferraris and McLarens behind me. Hey man, Brody stammered, his voice lacking every ounce of the swagger he had displayed at the diner table. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but Chelsea is with me now. You can't just roll up here with your rich friends and try to flex on us. Flex on you? Zach interrupted, stepping up beside me, his height towering over Brody. Kid, he didn't come here to flex on you. He didn't even know you were here. You're standing in our private club's designated staging area because you couldn't read the flyer. Zach leaned down, tapping the tip of his shoe against the front wheel of Brody's custom e-bike. $3 grand in modifications? Zach chuckled softly. My front brake calipers cost more than your entire life savings. Get this garbage out of our way before I have the city tow it into the river. Brody's face turned from pale to a deep, burning crimson. He opened his mouth to shout, to hurl an insult, but his gaze fell upon the 4 imposing security guards who had just stepped out of the black Escalade trailing our convoy. The guards stood quietly by the curb, their hands folded in front of their tailored suits, their eyes sharp and unblinking. Brody swallowed hard. He didn't say another word. He grabbed his handlebars, kicked up his kickstand, and looked at Chelsea. Let's go, Chelsea. Get on. Chelsea didn't move. She was staring at me, her chest heaving, tears brimming at the corners of her eyes. Nick, please talk to me. Is this a prank? Are you doing this to get back at me because I said those things? I don't play pranks, Chelsea, I said quietly. I turned my back on her, walking back toward the driver's side of the Aventador. Zach, let's head up to the hillside track. The air down here is foul. Copy that, boss, Zach grinned. Nick, Chelsea shrieked, taking 2 running steps after me. Nick, wait. One of my security details smoothly stepped into her path, extending a single, gloved arm to block her gently but firmly. Miss, please step back from the vehicle. Let me go. That's my boyfriend, she screamed, her voice echoing frantically under the bridge as the V12 engines around us roared back to life. Nick, look at me. Nick. I pulled the scissor door down, clicked my seatbelt into place, and hit the ignition. The engine roared, drowning out her cries, drowning out the music, drowning out the night. I shifted into gear, pressed the gas, and launched the car onto the open highway, leaving the neon lights under the bridge far behind in my rearview mirror. Chelsea didn't sleep that night. I knew this because David called me at 7:30 the next morning while I was sitting on my penthouse terrace sipping black coffee and reviewing the quarterly acquisition reports for Vance Global. She called me 6 times between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m., David said, his voice laced with a mixture of disbelief and quiet amusement over the phone line. She was sobbing, Nick. Absolutely hysterical. She kept asking if you were actually the chairman of the parent company, or if you were secretly a high-level scammer who borrowed a supercar. I took a slow sip of coffee. What did you tell her? I didn't answer her calls, David chuckled. I followed your instructions. I let it go to voicemail. But she's at the office right now, Nick. She showed up an hour early, sitting at her desk, waiting for the floor to open. She looks like a ghost. Good, I said smoothly. Has the HR adjustment gone through? Everything is set, David confirmed. The board meeting is scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. Your executive team is already briefed. I'll be there at 9:55. At 9:50 a.m., I arrived at the glass skyscraper housing David's tech firm, a company that Vance Global had acquired an 80% controlling stake in 2 years ago. I didn't wear a flannel shirt. I didn't wear a plain, unbranded jacket. I wore a charcoal gray, 3-piece bespoke Tom Ford suit. A silk tie tied in a flawless Windsor knot. My hair was styled cleanly, and 2 armed executive guards walked 2 paces behind me as I stepped out of the private elevator onto the executive floor. The open plan office was bustling with analysts, developers, and project managers. The moment I walked through the glass doors, the chatter died down. Employees sat up straight, shooting curious, intimidated glances at the stranger walking beside their CEO. Chelsea was sitting at her cubicle near the center of the floor. She was wearing the same dress from the night before, her hair slightly messy, dark circles carved under her eyes. She was clutching a cold paper cup of coffee, staring blankly at her computer monitor. When David clapped his hands loudly to gather everyone's attention, she snapped out of her daze and stood up. Attention everyone, David announced, his voice carrying authority across the silent floor. As you know, our firm underwent a major structural integration with our parent conglomerate 2 years ago. Today, the chairman and chief executive officer of Vance Global is visiting our branch personally to review our department budgets and staff allocations. David turned to me. bowing his head slightly with genuine professional respect. Everyone, please welcome Chairman Nicholas Vance. A collective gasp rippled through the marketing department. Chelsea's paper cup slipped from her fingers. Cold coffee spilled across her desk, soaking through her papers, dripping onto her carpet, but she didn't seem to notice. She stood frozen, her eyes wide, staring at me as if the ground beneath her feet had suddenly given way into a bottomless pit. Nicholas Vance. The man whose name was etched onto the bronze plaque in the building lobby. The man whose signature appeared at the bottom of every corporate grant, every major bonus check, every company-wide memorandum. Nick. Her boring middle-class, $80,000-a-year boyfriend. Mr. Vance, David continued, picking up a leather-bound folder from his assistant. Before we begin the executive review, there are a few administrative corrections regarding staff compensation that require your signature. I stepped up to the podium, resting my hands on the polished wood, my gaze sweeping over the crowd before settling on Chelsea's bloodless face. Go ahead, David, I said, my voice rich, deep, and resonant through the ceiling speakers. First, David read aloud from the document regarding employee Chelsea Lynn. 3 years ago, an administrative error listed her monthly intern stipend at $2,500, which subsequently scaled her full-time junior salary to $96,000 annually. David paused, looking up at the room. Upon internal audit, it was discovered that this rate was 400% above the industry standard for her tier. Effective immediately, Miss Lynn's compensation will be adjusted to the standard entry-level baseline of $32,000 per year. The excess funds disbursed over the last 36 months will be reviewed by accounting. A few junior analysts nearby whispered nervously to each other, shooting strange looks at Chelsea. Chelsea's knees buckled. She had to grab the edge of her cubicle partition to keep from falling. $32,000. Without the extra income one had secretly funded, she couldn't even afford her car payment, let alone her shopping sprees or high-end cosmetics. Second, David proceeded, flipping the page, regarding Miss Lynn's residential corporate housing on Grand Avenue, the private trust that previously subsidized her monthly rent has formally terminated its sponsorship as of midnight. The building management has issued an immediate notice. Miss Lynn must either assume the full market rent of $5,200 a month or vacate the premises within 3 business days. $5,200. Chelsea whimpered out loud, her voice trembling so violently that the girl in the next cubicle turned away in awkward discomfort. Lastly, I cut in softly, taking the pen from David's assistant and signing the document with a smooth, decisive stroke. Miss Lynn's assignment on the high-profile Zenith account is revoked. Reassign her to General Archives. I handed the pen back, closed the folder, and looked directly into Chelsea's eyes. Any questions, Miss Lynn? I asked, my voice calm, professional, and chillingly polite. Chelsea stared at me, tears streaming down her pale cheeks, her mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled out of water. Nick, please, you can't do this. I don't have anywhere to go. Miss Lynn, David said sternly, stepping forward with a frown. Address the chairman properly and keep personal matters out of the workplace. The entire room was staring at her now. The respect she had enjoyed for 3 years, the special treatment, the easy assignments, the generous bonuses she thought she had earned through her own sheer talent, had vanished in less than 3 minutes. She wasn't a rising corporate star. She was just a girl whose invisible ladder had just been kicked out from under her feet. I turned on my heel, buttoning my suit jacket. David, let's head to the boardroom. Right away, Chairman, David said, following me down the hallway, leaving Chelsea standing alone in the middle of the crowded office, surrounded by the dripping mess of her spilled coffee. By noon, the news had spread through the entire company. Chelsea spent 3 hours locked in the women's bathroom, sobbing until her eyes were swollen shut. When she finally walked back out to her desk, she found 2 HR representatives waiting for her with cardboard boxes, supervising her transfer to the basement archive room. Desperate, terrified, and facing an eviction notice she couldn't afford, she pulled out her backup phone, a cheap, cracked model she used for work, and called. Brody, baby, please pick up. She wept into the speaker as she walked toward the subway station. I'm in trouble. The landlord is kicking me out of my apartment. I need a place to stay. A place to stay? Brody's voice over the line was harsh, heavy with the sounds of a noisy, low-end garage in the background. Chelsea, I've got my own problems. The cops showed up at my shop this morning. Someone reported my bike for illegal modifications and unregistered street racing. They impounded my ride. What? Chelsea gasped, stopping on the sidewalk. Your bike got impounded? Yeah. The tow fee and fines are $3,000. Brody yelled, his voice laced with venom. And my guy at the yard said the report came directly from the City's traffic commissioner. Do you have any idea who that old man under the bridge was last night? He's friends with everyone in this city. Brody let out a vicious curse over the line. This is your fault. You brought that billionaire ex-boyfriend drama into my life. If you hadn't posted that stupid video bragging about my bike, none of this would have happened. Brody, how can you blame me? Chelsea sobbed, her heart sinking into her stomach. I gave up 3 years of my life for you. I dumped Nick for you. I didn't ask you to dump him. Brody spat back coldly. I thought you were a rich girl with a high-paying tech job. Turns out you're just an intern making 30 grand a year, living in a subsidized apartment you can't even afford. You're useless to me, Chelsea. Don't call me again. Click. The line went dead. Chelsea stood on the noisy city street, the cold autumn wind whipping her hair across her face, holding the buzzing phone against her ear. He was gone. The wild, adventurous boy who had made her feel alive had discarded her the second she became a burden. Panic, raw, suffocating, primal panic, flooded her mind. She ran. She ran 5 blocks through the city traffic, her heels clicking violently against the pavement, until she reached the small street where our old Thai diner sat. She slammed open the glass door, her chest heaving, her hair wild, startling the waiter behind the counter. The trash, she gasped, grabbing the waiter's arm frantically. The trash bin. Next to the back booth from last night. Where is it? The waiter pulled his arm back, looking at her like she was a lunatic. Miss, it's 2 in the afternoon. The city sanitation truck cleared our commercial bins at 6 this morning. No. Chelsea screamed, grabbing her head in despair. You don't understand. My jewelry was in there. The bracelets. The necklace. The pin. Miss, I told you last night those items looked real, the waiter said, shaking his head with a look of quiet pity. You told your boyfriend they were $50 junk and threw them away yourself. Chelsea collapsed onto one of the wooden chairs, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with violent, uncontrollable sobs. $80,000 in custom French platinum, a $15,000 vintage Mont Blanc pen, a $2,000 Parisian leather keychain. She had thrown over $100,000 into a greasy restaurant trash can just to prove a point to a boy who didn't even care enough to help her pay a tow fee, and the brownstone in Brooklyn. The papers Nick had torn up in his office drawer. She remembered the way Nick had always carried a leather folder in his bag during our anniversary dates. She remembered how he used to smile at her, asking her what kind of architecture she liked, asking her if she preferred brown brick or red limestone. It hadn't been a hypothetical question. He was buying her a $10 million home, and she had traded it all for a $3,000 electric scooter. 2 weeks later, the grand ballroom on the top floor of Vance Tower was illuminated by massive crystal chandeliers. The event was the annual Vance Global Philanthropic Gala, the most exclusive high society event of the season. The room was packed with international diplomats, tech moguls, media executives, and Hollywood celebrities. I stood near the floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline, wearing a tailored midnight blue tuxedo. In my hand was a glass of sparkling water. Beside me stood Evelyn Vance, my older sister and the chief managing director of our European division, looking radiant in an emerald silk gown. You look remarkably relaxed for a man who just purged his entire personal life, Evelyn remarked, sipping her champagne, her sharp eyes scanning the room. I feel light, I replied smoothly, like I finally put down a heavy, useless piece of luggage. Good, she smiled. Because father was worried you were going to waste another 3 years playing house with a girl who couldn't tell the difference between glass and diamonds. Down in the marble lobby on the ground floor, chaos was unfolding. Chelsea stood outside the velvet ropes of the VIP entrance, wearing an ill-fitting, off-the-rack evening dress she had bought using the last limit on her credit card. Her face was pale, her eyes rimmed with red, her hands trembling as she clutched a small leather clutch. She had spent 2 weeks trying to get an appointment with me. She had called my assistant 50 times, waited outside my private residential garage in the freezing rain, and begged David to intercede on her behalf. David had blocked her number. My security detail had served her with a formal civil trespass notice. Tonight was her last desperate gamble. She had used an old press pass she had stolen from the tech firm's media file to sneak past the outer security gate. Miss, your name is not on the guest registry, the head security officer said, blocking her path with his massive frame. Please step aside. You don't understand. Chelsea wept, trying to shove past him, her voice shrill and hysterical. I'm Nicholas Vance's girlfriend. We were together for 3 years. Ask him. Just call him on the radio. Tell him Chelsea is here. A few high society guests passing by turned to stare, whispering behind their silk gloves. Miss, if you do not step back immediately, I will have the NYPD escort you off the premises, the guard warned, his tone dropping an octave into absolute authority. Nick, Chelsea shrieked, lifting her head toward the grand marble staircase, her voice echoing desperately through the high-ceilinged lobby. Nick, I'm please, Nick, give me one more chance. I stepped out onto the mezzanine balcony on the second floor, looking down at the commotion. Beside me, two event coordinators paused, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Vance, should we have the police remove her? I looked down at Chelsea. She saw me. Her eyes lit up with a wild, terrifying spark of hope. She broke away from the guard's arm, running to the base of the marble staircase, looking up at me like a drowning person reaching for a lifeline. Nick, she cried out, tears ruining her makeup, leaving dark streaks down her cheeks. Nick, I know I was wrong. I was blind. I was stupid. That boy tricked me. He didn't mean anything to me. You're the only one I love, Nick. Please, remember the tie place. Remember the scarf you bought me. She pulled the cheap, worn cashmere scarf from her purse, the one I had given her 3 years ago, claiming it cost $10 at a street market. I kept it, Nick. She sobbed, holding it up like a holy relic. I wear it every day. You said you wanted to give me the world. I'm ready, Nick. I don't care about the cars or the money. I just want you back. The entire lobby went dead silent. Hundreds of elite guests watched the scene, their eyes shifting from the weeping girl on the stairs up to the powerful, untouchable billionaire standing on the balcony. I rested my hands on the polished brass railing, looking down at her. My heart didn't ache. My hands didn't shake. I looked at the cashmere scarf in her hands, the scarf I had spent $4,000 on, the scarf she had treated like a rag until she found out who I really was. Chelsea. I spoke softly, but my voice was carried clearly by the acoustics of the grand hall. She gasped, wiping her nose with her sleeve, looking up with desperate, pleading eyes. Yes, Nick. Yes. You didn't keep the scarf because you loved it, I said, every word falling with the precise, heavy weight of an absolute truth. You kept it because you thought it was cheap, comfortable, and easy to replace, just like you thought I was. Chelsea froze, her breath catching in her throat. You told me at the restaurant that you were tired of defending me. I continued, looking into her eyes without a shred of pity. You told me I lived like a retiree. You told me we belonged in two completely different worlds. I took a half step back from the railing, buttoning my jacket. You were right, Chelsea. We do belong in different worlds. And tonight yours ends at the door. I looked at the head security officer. Escort her out. No. Nick? No. Chelsea screamed as 4 security guards grabbed her by her arms, lifting her off her feet. She kicked, thrashing wildly, her cheap evening dress tearing at the seam, her tears soaking the velvet carpet as she was dragged backward toward the glass exit doors. I love you, Nick. Please. Don't do this to me. I have nothing left. Nick. The heavy glass door slammed shut, cutting off her voice into complete, absolute silence. The high society guests in the lobby resumed their quiet chatter. The string quartet began to play again, and the waiters continued carrying trays of vintage champagne through the crowd. The world kept spinning, and she was no longer a part of mine. Epilogue. The view from the top. 6 months later, spring arrived in the city, washing away the cold winter gray with warm sunshine and blooming cherry blossoms along Central Park. I sat in the corner booth of a quiet, high-end French bistro downtown enjoying a quiet lunch with Victoria, a senior partner at an international architecture firm who had recently joined our global board. She was intelligent, sharp, elegant, and possessed a dry, brilliant sense of humor that kept me laughing throughout the meal. So, Victoria smiled, cutting a piece of her truffle tart. Is it true you used to drive an 8-year-old Audi just to avoid high society matchmakers? It was a practical car. I chuckled softly, taking a sip of wine. Great gas mileage. You are absurd, Nicholas, she laughed, her dark eyes shining with warm, genuine affection. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass windows of the restaurant, I happened to glance at the street outside. A young woman in a faded, wrinkled office suit was standing near the subway entrance, holding a stack of promotional flyers for a local real estate agency. It was Chelsea. She looked thin, her face gaunt, her long hair tied back in a plain ponytail. She was handing out flyers to passing pedestrians, most of whom ignored her completely, brushing past her without a single glance. Her shoes were worn down at the heel. Her hands were red from the cool spring wind. As she turned to offer a flyer to a businessman in a suit, her eyes happened to drift toward the glass window of our restaurant. She saw me. She saw me sitting in the sunlit booth, wearing a bespoke linen suit, a glass of expensive wine in my hand, laughing with a woman whose grace and beauty completely eclipsed anything Chelsea could have ever dreamed of being. Chelsea stopped mid-step. Her arm froze in the air, the the stack of flyers slipping slightly in her grip. She stared at me through the glass, her eyes filled with a deep, permanent, agonizing regret. A regret that would follow her for the rest of her life, reminding her every single day of the kingdom she had thrown into a trash can for a 3-second ride on a cheap electric bike. I didn't hold her gaze. I looked back at Victoria, smiled at a joke she had just made, and raised my glass to toast the warm afternoon sun. The window was thick. The glass was clear. And from where I sat, the street outside was completely silent.